Now, The Reckoning is not a surprise for anyone who has read a John Grisham novel. Something happens, usually a murder, sometimes money laundering, and then you're treated to the step-by-step process of how they prosecute the offenders, or how they track them down first and then prosecute them. But basically it's very law and case review heavy, it feels like. And if you're into that kind of thing, like I am sometimes, I'm in the mood for that, it's a fun ride to take. This book for me wasn't completely satisfying, and it might very well be realistic, but it wasn't very satisfying, at least the last part of it. So for main characters, you have Pete Banning, who is a war hero to the town. He served honorably in World War II and has come back to the town, and everything was fine until about a year after returning from the war. He killed somebody and refuses to talk about why he did it. And then you have Liza Banning, who is the typical stay-at-home mom character from this time period. We're talking around World War II, so she raises the kids, doesn't challenge her husband on too much, and is basically doing everything she can to maintain a proper running household. And then there are the kids who are both away at college when the events opening the book take place. And then last but not least, you have the Reverend Dexter Bell, who is a very popular Methodist preacher in the town of Clanton, Mississippi. So right away, I am struck again as to how well John Grisham can paint a picture, not just of describing the town of Clanton, Mississippi, but the inhabitants of that town, and how people, and I think this is just as true now as it was back then, are always keen to insert themselves into whatever the major story of the day is. I love how he describes that. I thought that was, the way he does it is beautiful. Now, while you expect to learn a lot about the law in one of John Grisham's books, one of the things you do not expect, at least I didn't expect, was a history lesson on World War II. A very specific one involving the Bataan Death March, which I had heard of and didn't know anything about, because history for me has always been boring. And I know it shouldn't be. I know I should be a better scholar of history, because it's important to do so, but it's presented so oftentimes in the most boring manner possible that I just can't pay attention to it. I learned more about the Bataan Death March in this book than I ever would have otherwise. It's just not something I would have gone out of my way to learn about, and now I'm intrigued enough to probably learn a little bit more on my own time. The main character, Pete Banning, of course, serves over in the Philippines during World War II and becomes directly involved, unfortunately, in the Bataan Death March, and it's a horrific chapter in a horrific world war. It's very important for the development of the character of Pete Banning in some ways, but then again, it seems like the man who did the things he did during the war would not have come home and committed a murder, even though he'd killed plenty of people during his time in World War II. My favorite section of the book is the second section. It's divided into 3 parts, and the second part is called The Boneyard, and it deals entirely with Pete Banning's experiences over in the Philippines during World War II. Just him fighting guerrilla style over there was very interesting to read about. In fact, the actions of Pete and his guerrilla comrades over there were loosely based on actions of some real guerrilla groups that did exist during the war and did feed important intelligence to the Allied forces. So it's a good book all around, but I do have to say I had some quibbles with it, and to discuss those, we're going to have to go over to the spoiler couch. Okay, so the parts that I don't like about this book are, I don't like what happens to Joel and Stella. Okay, I realize that this kind of thing probably happens very frequently, where you have cases of wrongful death, and so the family of the person who was killed will civilly sue the family of the perpetrator, of the murderer. I don't think that's right. I have a real hard time with that, especially in a case like this one, as described in this book, where you have the two kids who had absolutely no knowledge of their father's intention to go into town and murder Dexter Bell. They had no idea. They shouldn't be held liable. Their dad did something horrible, and he's dead now, and nothing is going to bring back either Dexter Bell or Pete Banning. The kids had nothing to do with it. The family of Dexter Bell, of course you feel sorry for her, and you feel sorry for Dexter Bell's children. At the same time, Pete Banning's children didn't do anything wrong. They shouldn't have to pay for it. And literally, the lawyers go after all of their assets. I have a big problem with that. The other part I don't like is the actions of Pete Banning. I'm sorry. He, as upset as he might have been at his wife for cheating on him and then having an abortion, murder was not the answer. I don't think someone who risked his life so many times to save the lives of his friends, his brother soldiers, I think someone like that would have appreciated that there's value to life and that you always have a choice to make in life to value the lives of others. And as much cruelty as he experienced firsthand in the war, I can't imagine him then turning around and being cruel, not necessarily to Dexter Bell, whom he thought had slept with his wife, but who, as it turns out, did not. But leaving Dexter out of it, I don't think he would have inflicted that kind of pain on Dexter's wife and kids. I don't see the character acting that way, and that's just me. So those are my big quibbles on there. So that's it. I think we're done here. Let's go back over this way. As always, sometimes my brain will pick out famous celebrities to cast in the various roles of a book. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but in this book it happened quite a bit. So for the main character, Pete Banning, I pictured an aged down, of course, version of Michael Biehn from Terminator, is what most people know him from, and his work on Aliens, the sequel to Alien. For his wife, Liza Banning, I was picturing January Jones from Mad Men. Strangely enough, I didn't picture anybody famous for the two kids, Joel and Stella. For Sheriff Nix Gridley, however, I was picturing character actor Bruce McGill, who I've seen as a sheriff previously, and I think it was in My Cousin Vinny. And so I don't know why, but my brain just immediately said, that's the sheriff of Clanton, Mississippi. And then for litigator Birch Dunlop, I was picturing Colin Farrell. Despite my quibbles that I gave you in the spoiler couch section, I would still recommend it. I'd give it probably a high B+, just because some of the character's actions don't make sense to me based on his own background and the character development of those people. I just don't think they would have taken some of the actions they did. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Ken McKim. You take care and read more books.